News Now is brought to you by the Bank of Guam, the People's Bank. From the Pacific News Center in Hagåtña, Guam, here's Clint Ridgell and Janella Carrera with Betsy Brown and Roselle Romanes. PNC Sports with Blake Watson. And weather with Joanna O. With your news now.
Good evening and thanks for tuning in to the Pacific News Center's News Now. We are broadcasting live in Saipan and in Guam. I'm Clint Ridgell.
And I'm Janella Carrera. Thanks for tuning in. Topping your news tonight, with a remarkably high rate of reported sexual crimes in the Guam community and some emerging trends in recent years, PNC sat down with some stakeholders to find out what could be the reason behind it and what could be done to prevent it.
You know, 85% of the victims we see are minors here.
In 2013, the Healing Hearts Crisis Center served a total of 111 sexual assault victims. Of that, 92 were minors. That's an alarming 83% of all cases the center saw. In 2014, although the number of minors went down, the majority of victims who come through Healing Hearts is still children. Marissa Uggan is a program manager for Healing Hearts.
Last year, the youngest that we saw was 2 years old, and the eldest that we saw was 58, whereas the year before we did see a 1-year-old.
There isn't a clear explanation as to why most sexual assault victims, for Guam at least, are minors, but Uggan says there are many factors to consider. For one, Guam is a small community, and it is also very family-oriented.
You take that statistic, you take the idea that most of our victims are minors, and you couple that with the relationship of the perpetrator to the victim, and they pretty much coincide. So, like I was mentioning, 75% in 2014 and 87% in 2013 of the victims reported knowing their perpetrator, and you have 85% of our victims being minors. So, the vulnerability of children, because it's on Guam with all the extended family, oftentimes you have multiple families living together.
Although the majority of perpetrators are known to the victims, Uggan says there has also been an increase in the number of them being strangers. As Uggan just pointed out, in 2013, 87% of them knew their perpetrators. Last year, only 75% knew who they were.
And from our observation, that goes hand in hand with, and I don't like to use the word trend, but I guess it's the statistical word. That drop goes hand in hand with an increase in multiple perpetrator assaults.
Medical consultant Dr. Ellen Bez points out that while many sex crimes still go unreported, the increase in recent years could also mean more and more victims are coming forward. Healing Hearts, along with other agencies, conduct several outreach programs each year.
And not always, but many, many times after that program, we'll get a child who will come up to the teacher and say, I got one of those red flag touches.
Only about 25% of their cases are acute, which means the rape occurred within 72 hours, which is also the best time to preserve any DNA evidence that could be used against the perpetrator. You can read more on this topic at pacificnewscenter.com.
Meanwhile, the Guam Police Department's juvenile investigation team tells PNC that there is a large number of cases flowing into their office regarding cyberbullying and sexting. In an effort to put a stop to online bullying, police officers are visiting the high schools and talking to students about the dangers of sharing too much information. PNC's Roselle Romanes joins us now for more on this report. Roselle?
Obscene photos, derogatory remarks, and videos of illegal activity. We've all seen it. With technology playing a big part in our everyday lives, we've encountered a scenario where someone falls victim to cyberbullying or sexting, whether on TV, online, or maybe it even happened to someone you know. We visit John F. Kennedy High School today, where police officers inform students about the do's and don'ts of posting on social media. Think before you hit send. That's what the Guam Police Department Juvenile Investigation Team is trying to get teens to do before they text someone or post anything on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or other networking sites.
We're here to talk to the students in regards to social media threats that's happening involving some of the students in the school. And some of it is sexting and cyberbullying.
Detective John Balvin says because they are seeing a growing number of cyberbullying and sexting cases involving high school students, their department hopes to spread awareness and educate students about internet vulnerability.
The threat is real.
The officers presented the dangers of sharing information on social media to about 2,000 students at John F. Kennedy High School this morning. Balvin says they plan on visiting other high schools as well. He sends this message to local teens.
High school students, think before you hit send. Remember that what you send out in the media, what you send out on social networking, can always come back and haunt you. What you did a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, that was fun then might embarrass you as an adult. So be cognizant of what you do.
Rosal Romanes, PNC News.
All right, thanks, Rizal. An attorney with the Public Defender's Office has been arrested for allegedly beating his wife with a steel cooking pot. Public Defender James Robert Mortland III was charged with aggravated assault as a third-degree felony and family violence. According to the complaint, Mortland's wife returned home from Kmart with her 2 young children when, out of nowhere, her drunk and angry husband began punching her in the face. The victim then grabbed a steel pot and swung it at Mortland to stop him from assaulting her, but police say Mortland grabbed the pot and used that to hit his wife on the head several times, all this happening in front of their children. The victim told police that this wasn't the first time her husband has been violent, but this is the first time she's ever reported it to police. Police say they noticed bumps on the victim's head, swollen cheeks, and abrasions on her arm. While in custody, police say Mortland accused police officers of assaulting him, but police say that's a lie. Calls to the Public Defender's Office were not returned as of news time.
There's going to be another pageant on Guam next week. Mrs Guam is set for next Wednesday, February the 11th at the Sheraton, but it was originally marketed as Mrs Guam International. So why is the name changed? Here's PNC's Betsy Brown with more. Betsy, so what happened?
Well, Clint, Mrs. Guam International became Mrs. Guam only recently, and it's likely because a cease and desist letter was sent from the Mrs. International pageant system. It's Guam's first pageant for married women since 1993, and 8 ladies began preparing for the contest in November. But they only recently learned that whoever is crowned Mrs. Guam won't be going on to the Mrs. International pageant in Jacksonville, Florida. Pageant organizer Jerome Tamagan was sent a cease and desist letter by the attorneys representing International Pageants, Inc. The letter states that while Tamagan requested information on the company's international pageant system, no agreements or other affiliations between Tamagan and the company were made. Therefore, the letter states, quote, "You are not and have never been affiliated with the company's international pageant system." The letter demands that Tamagan cease and desist all use of the term international in connection with the pageant. Tamagan, also known as Leia Tsunami, was not available for an on-camera interview today, but PNC asked Mrs. Guam Assistant Pageant Director Adam Diego if the winning contestant will go on to compete in Mrs. International. His answer was no. Quote, "Due to unforeseen issues regarding the international organization in the mainland, we will not be sending a contestant to Mrs. International." Diego says the contestants are all aware that the pageant is not affiliated with Mrs. International. He also confirmed that out of the 8 original contestants, 3 have pulled out of the contest. Diego says the 5 ladies still participating in Mrs. Guam will have the opportunity to compete on the international stage in October, but not with Mrs. International. He says he's excited about the new opportunity and says that news will be fully revealed on the night of the Mrs. Guam pageant.
All right, thanks, Betsy. Well, earlier this week, Guam residents learned of the sale of the Guam edition of the Mariana's Variety newspaper to the owner of Cortec International, Ho S. Yoon. Yoon purchased the Guam Variety via another company called Guam Times LLC. The Guam Variety was previously owned by Eunice Art Studio, a Saipan-based company that also publishes Saipan's Mariana's Variety News and Views. According to the release, Amir Eunice will stay on as the publisher of the Guam Variety. We asked Speaker Judy Wonpat for her thoughts on the sale. She spoke highly of the paper, saying she hopes it will retain all its employees and remain objective under new ownership.
I hope none of the employees, the reporters, will lose their jobs. I hope they'll be able to continue their employment. The second thing is that I've always admired, of course, you know, the commitment that the Marianas has, provided, Mariana's Variety has provided to the people of Guam. So I'm hoping then that they will continue that same objective approach in reporting the news to the people of Guam.
While Yoon is the owner of Guam Times LLC, PNC learned that two former GovGuam employees who now work for Yoon's other company, Cortec International, helped broker the media deal. They are former GITA Administrator Henry Taitano and Governor Eddie Calvo's former Director of Communications, Troy Torres. Shortly before leaving the Calvo administration, Torres also worked briefly for GITA as well. Guam Times LLC owner Yoon is quoted in the press release as saying, "The publisher, the newsroom, and the staff all are committed to a higher standard of journalism. What makes the Variety so successful is the independence of their newsroom. It's a great operation. We see the potential and the value of investing in this market. We are a local company that wants to engage residents with great journalism backed up by local ownership. We're excited to give it the local support it needs to flourish," end quote.
All right, let's check in now with Blake Watson to find out what's going on in sports.
Just 1 second, I got to put in a call to 911 because the Ukadu Bulldogs got robbed of an easy win game last night. I'll have the full details, plus tennis, girls tennis, coming up on sports. Yes, hello, I need to report a robbery. Yeah, it was bad. Yeah. No, nothing was taken, just...